I am YamatoCannon, and this is Muffin, and you're watching Thorin's YouTube channel.
Right, this is going to be another episode of Reflections, and my guest for this one is going to be Gillius, who is obviously a veteran jungler from the European region, currently teamless, not playing at the moment. By the way, give us a quick update at the start of this thing. What's going on at the moment? Where have you been?
Right now I'm just streaming, co-streaming. I could have played ERL this year, but I decided against it, so I'm just gonna play solo queue and stream for now.
Okay. Right, one thing I want to talk about in your career is, even though, funnily enough, I think in the modern day, actually, maybe some people know you from Dom Stream or maybe when you were on Schalke, etc., people actually maybe aren't that familiar with the meme about you being on a million different squads and all the different teams you're on and stuff. So to go way back in time, the interesting thing I also thought we could do in this interview is obviously you played with a lot of players. Like I can get your take on people in different time periods. So if people don't know, if they go way back in the day, all the way back 10 plus years ago to season 4, you were already playing in your first teams there with players who, if you're actually from around back then, these are all known players. Like SmittyJ was around the scene a long time, obviously. You had Fox, he was called What the Fox at the time, the guy who became that like SK gaming mid laner, if people remember, who you obviously played with later in your career. You had a whole bunch of people, Haydal, who wasn't called that back then. Like there's a whole bunch of, like, it seems like actually even your early teams, you were in amongst the people who were in sort of like the challenger peer group, right? Was it easy to get into the scene?
I would say so. Like, you just needed a high rank back then, and you would get noticed. People would ask you to play like team ranked, or just like play tryouts and stuff. So once I was high on the ladder, it was pretty easy to like connect with people.
Some of those names I mentioned, what I do want to ask you about is SmittyJ, actually, because here's what's funny. People maybe only know him from being stuck at this level. He was often in the challenger scene. Then he had a few shots in LCS, and then that was it for his career. In fact, if people don't remember, I think the last one was the H2K when he came onto that lineup where he did the run back. And I will say, I knew people like Kelsey Moser, who was a coach in that team. And she actually told me this is actually an underrated player. Like, he actually understood more things than people maybe realise, and maybe it wasn't like pure skill or whatever. What would you say about this player? What was he like? You played with him in a few different teams, including going on years later.
I was always one of the people who believed in him because he was just extremely good, like mechanically, and he was always top 10 in the ladder. In the end of the day, I had some issues with him, like working with him, like where it didn't work out. But like from a player like skill standpoint, he's like extremely talented, super good player. But it had never really worked out between me and him.
And then I've mentioned him before, but actually the Swedish mid laner Fox, if people don't know, once upon a time, he was part of a peer group of people like the Febervans of the world who were coming in the LCS, and people actually thought this guy might end up being a top player. Obviously, he had a few years. I know he was with you on that like challenger team later in NA, even like years later. And obviously another player where he had the initial rise, and then he kind of got forgotten about, it feels like. Who was this guy? Was he actually like a top talent at this time in the early days?
Yeah, he was extremely good. I mean, he was very unknown, like, but like he had a random name, and he was like, I think rank 2 or rank 3 on the ladder.
Right.
I don't know. This guy was a beast in my eyes. He was just a bit like, his personality was not super fitting, like for teams. Like, he wouldn't talk much. He was more of a shy guy. He had to like come out of his shell. But yeah, like skill-wise, this guy was a beast. Like, I loved playing with him. That's why I also wanted to play with him in NA later on.
Right. What can you tell me about the situation? Because I feel like if someone looks at your career, it looks really unfair, because early on, you're basically part of the Unicorns of Love team that qualifies to the LCS, but then they just go on without you. And obviously, like, it becomes one of the famous things, which we'll get to later, of like the whole Kikis replacing you meme of like, but why on this one? Because this one seems really unfair, because actually, like, you've just won like a LAN series against the Millennium team who had some pretty good players. Like, doesn't that earn you a spot in the LCS at this time?
It should have, but I did some things that I think they didn't like after we promoted. Like, I was the only person asking questions where, like, what do we do with the organization? Like, are we selling the spot? Are we sharing the money? I think this is some of the things like some people didn't like. And then
that made them like uncomfortable. They want you to just kind of play and not think about that stuff or something.
Yeah, I think so. Because in the end of the day, like, I was the only guy like thinking about it. Like, okay, we just got a spot in the LCS. Shouldn't we like be rewarded with something, or should we not like sell the spot and then get some cash and play for that org? But I think this is one of the things where they just didn't like me anymore. And then when I went to Taiwan to play Worlds, I was really disconnected from all my teammates. So when I came back, they just said, yeah, we're playing with Kikis. So
right. Because one thing I feel like has aged really poorly, and I'll admit I did this myself, is when this team first came in, the Unicorns loved it, the LCS, I remember thinking, I would give the analogy for like Mad Lions right now in LEC, where everyone who wasn't Spanish was just like, this team will do nothing. Who are these guys? Why do I care? And in fact, even though the team was famously, after this, they were in finals, they were like a decent team, I remember everyone basically being like, I think people maybe gave like Power of Evil some credits at the time. He was kind of like, it is already looking really good. But I remember almost everyone else got trashed on this team, dude. Like, I think Vizichachi maybe got a tiny bit of respect, but like, people were obviously mega hating on Vardags. I think even Kikis probably had a little bit of backlash. At this time, no one knew Hillisang. He wasn't this player that he is now, this legendary player, right? What would you actually say about this group of talent? Because I have to say, like, if you look back now, it's a pretty good roster, actually. Like, we're talking about like fucking mid-top and support's a banger. That's pretty good, right? Were they actually good players back then? Were they more raw? What were they like?
You're talking about when I promoted with them, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the story was pretty random, like how I got into the team. They were playing the first promotion match. Basically, they were 10th place in the ladder. This is last place. And their first match was against the first place team, against G2 back then, against Ocelot still playing. And their jungler couldn't get a visa for Germany. So they like hit me up. I think Power of Evil called me on my phone. He said, hey, we don't have a jungler for our tournament tomorrow. Can you play for us? So I was like, sure, I lived in Cologne anyway. So when I arrived there, they basically told me, yo, like, don't have any hopes. We're playing versus the first place team. This is going to be a hard match. And I didn't know anyone in the team except Power of Evil. So I just I had no practice with them. We just played and we like knocked out G2 in the first round, like in the best of 3. And I mean, like Hillisang's, like these players back then were like diamond players. They were not known by anyone. Right. So I also had no clue how they're gonna be, and they were super insane. Like Hilly, Chachi really surprised me. I think Vardags was like whatever, I think he was mostly getting carried by Hilly. But yeah, Power of Evil was really, really good back then as well. And yeah, I think we surprised a lot of people, and I was surprised myself as well.
One of the weirdest things is, even though, like I say, especially for that meme of being on all the teams and being replaced by Kikis, people knew you were like a known quantity for many years. But what's bizarre is, I feel like unless on shows we mention it, everyone always forgets that you were the stand-in for Svenskeren at Worlds, as you alluded to, when SK Gaming, when Svenskeren said the things he said on solo queue that got him banned for the first 3 games. What happened was they brought in Gillius as the replacement. And what's weird is, everyone remembers Svenskeren got banned for the games, and they remember that he didn't place them. But for some reason, no one ever remembers you played. Now, to be fair, the joke is that's probably good for you, mate, because these were brutal games. But the thing is, I feel like the context isn't set up fairly on this. Like, this isn't your team. You're just literally getting called up, basically like emergency, like come to Asia, like you say, immediately, and play with a team that's like already done its boot camp and stuff, right? And you basically just have to come in and almost like, didn't you only get like a few days of practice? As far as I know, you almost came in and just played the games, right? And you're playing like Royal Never Give Up and TSM. Like, these aren't chumps. Like, this sounds like a hard situation to walk into.
I had 1 day of practice, but I think the problem was more like I'm also replacing the best player in the team, like Svenskeren.
Yes, true. He was a beast back then, right?
He was so insane. Like, because I was already in Taiwan with them for a week because I was the substitute, so I could like watch Svenskeren's scrims and stuff, and I was like learning so much from him. But yeah, basically, like, replace the best player, and Svenskeren was, I don't know, that was his meta, like, he was so insane on Kha'Zix, Lee Sin, all that kind of stuff. But honestly, it was a hard situation, because all the players were, like, kind of hopeless. They were like, wow, Svenskeren's banned, we're so fucked, like, what are we gonna do? I was, like, trying to get the mood. I was like, yeah, guys, I'm a jungle main, we got this. But yeah, the overall mood was bad. And yeah, it didn't help playing against like insane teams. Like back then, who did we face? TSM, and then we faced RNG. I don't know
whatever
if they were
called. I think Starhorn Royal Club at the time, maybe Uzi I's team.
Yeah, like Insec and Uzi. So it was a hard situation. I was not ready for it. That's for sure. Like I was not on that level.
Right. One of the weird things about this is then the next year though, you get to play finally in the EU LCS. You're on Unicorns of Love. But then I noticed, like, dude, this is weird because, one, people forget this. Believe it or not, there's times when Gillius has replaced Kikis, guys. This is one time. But then what's bizarre is they put you in, they were actually doing well in the split, and then they just replaced you with Horror, the old Korean jungler for the playoffs. What happened there? What's going on? By the way, does this imply back then, as a bigger point as well, did you have like some sort of like friction with teammates? Were you viewed as like a troublesome element? So why were you getting replaced in this way?
No, I had no friction with teammates at that time. It was basically Horror was set to come into the team. And when I came in, they said, your performance will decide if we play with you or with Horror in playoffs. And it didn't really matter. They just like said it.
Oh, they were going to do it anyway, you think, right? Okay.
Yeah. Because back then, I think Power of Evil said, like, you played so good. Like, there's a big chance we play with you in playoffs. And then I went home and I never, they basically told me they play with Horror. I don't know. It didn't really make much sense what they did. Like, I had pretty good synergy with that team back then. But, what can I do?
And then for people who don't know, you'd also around this same time, this is what's weird about your career is, as much as people might say it's like brutal, some of the cuts you've had, you seem to be able to find the next team pretty quick. Like you were in the Gamers 2 project before it became proper G2, where they had, I mean, if people don't know, in the process of qualification, they changed in some players, and the joke is, by the time they got to the LCS, most of the players didn't get to play except Perks, basically. So like, I know that was like a messy project. And if people don't know, as you alluded to before, this was actually when, it's kind of a cool story that a lot of people don't know, is that Ocelot made Gamers 2 as like a vanity project. It was for him personally. Literally, I know him. It was for him personally to qualify to the LCS again and sort of show people like, hey, it wasn't just because I was on SK Gaming and plus, I'm a big name. And at the time, it was like his personal brand. And what people don't know is after he failed a few times, he just came back and then basically finally decided, like, right, I'll let someone else play mid lane. And the joke is that eventually became Perks. And then that's when it all went awesome and they had this amazing success. So I know this was a really messy year where at the time, it feels like inside the org, people were desperate for success. And there was obviously loads of brutal cuts. They were trying lots of names in and out. Did this actually seem like it was a real project that you could have had like a future with? Do you actually think if I stay with this team, we're going to qualify?
At the start, I thought so. The reason why G2 was even in the Challenger series was because how they got in was like I beat the G2 team, like we knocked them out, and then Ocelot instantly DM'd me. Like we basically had no org back then, and Ocelot instantly DM'd me and was like, "Yo, can you guys join G2 and we take over your spot?" Like he was really like desperate, like that was his only chance. And then we talked it out and we got it done. And then I moved to Spain, and I had a feeling I'm gonna be with this org for like many years. Like I was like hitting rank 1 consistently at that time too. But we didn't have much success with that roster, and then we got Perks into the team. And I don't know, between me and Perks didn't really work out that well either. So at one point I was benched, and then they made it without me. But I don't know. I'm happy that for Ocelot's success and for Perks' success, but it didn't have to do much with me, like I was just in the middle of it. I was just benched.
Back around this time period, so people will know your persona has always been like to try and sort of trash talk and do that approach, right? And be a little bit controversial. Back in this time period, who was Gillius? Like back in 2014, 2015, like around this period of time, like you could actually argue for a young player. Like actually, these are a lot of brutal knockbacks, as we say in English. Like you've had the chance to stand in at Worlds, but then it's kind of like forgetful, rather it's worth forgetting. Like wasn't that great? You've had a bunch of times where you're like either the team's going to qualify or they're right on the brink, but then they replace you. Like I say, you got your little crack at LCS, but then turns out they wanted to replace you with the bigger name anyway. Like, was this not like something hitting your morale or your confidence? Did you still think like, were you a confident player back then? Did you believe you were going to make it at some point?
Yeah, I was always super confident. I obviously, it hurt emotionally a lot, like all the time, like getting benched left and right. But I just like kept going, and I really wanted to play in the LCS, so I just didn't give up and just kept going and kept grinding solo queue. That's all I did really.
Right, what's sad is you were then on the year of Elements where it was kind of the meme roster. Like, if you remember, the joke is even like the names, like there was that guy where, even though he was actually an alright player, he was called Steve as a top player and people even made fun of that. Like, it's just Steve, like just some guy from an office. But people don't remember, if you ever go back and look, dude, this shouldn't actually have been that bad. Like, when I look at the roster you had some talents. You had people like Mr. Rallis and stuff like this. These aren't like bomb players. Like, I know obviously the problem in this scenario is the org was in bad shape. Like, if people remember, that project basically was the Frog and Super Team. There's not even Frogging anymore. He's gone at this point, and it's basically sort of like on its last legs. It's like it's got a spot, so they're putting a team out. But I'm guessing this isn't like a max salary team or whatever. Like, what was this time period like? Because on the one hand, look, you get a full run at LCS, you kind of get a chance. But I know that one of the problems everyone tells me who's a good player in League is, on the one hand, you want to be in the league, so you're like, look, I'll take any chance I can, but then it sucks to be on the bad rosters where you feel like I can't win and then I don't get to show who I am. So what was this Elements period like for you?
So during the off season for this year, I was doing a lot of tryouts for Fnatic. And then basically I had an offer from Unicorns of Love as well to play on the starting roster.
Okay.
And then when I basically was pretty confident that I'm going to join Fnatic for this year. And then I declined the Unicorns of Love offer. And then in the end, Fnatic didn't get me. So I was like only left with the Elements team, right? I mean, for me, I didn't really look at the roster. I just thought, it's survival. Try my best, play really well in solo queue. I knew the roster was not super strong coming in. But it was a good first rookie experience for me to split. Like, I think I had some pretty like pop-off games. Like, especially my first game was really, really good on Lee Sin. And in the end, we actually didn't get relegated or into the relegation zone. So it was, I think, a success overall.
By the way, like you say, back then you would consider yourself like you're like a ganking jungler who does like you say, you play like the champions everyone knows for the playmaking, right? This is who the young Gilius was.
Yeah, I would say so. Like very mechanically strong. I would play like Nidalee, Lee Sin, Elise, like also play for a lot of invades and stuff. Yeah.
When would you try and pinpoint, if from memory you can, when did you start to develop your persona? Like, look, I know people already on solo queue, obviously famous EU West, everyone types and trash talks stuff, but when did you start to try and consciously like brand it, do you think?
When did I you mean like talking, like trash talking? And stuff?
But I mean, doing it sort of like consciously, like knowing like I'm doing this as my brand, like it's not like just in every now and then thoughts, like I'm going to do this as my approach. Like I'm going to tell people I'm better than them or I should be in the team instead of them. When did you start to do that more, do you think?
I think it was mostly when I was in America, actually.
Right. Okay.
Because our GM would always tell me like, yeah, you should talk some shit, make it more interesting, make people watch. So like, so I started doing it and people liked it on social media. And I think ever since then I did it. Before I didn't really do it much at all.
One thing people might not know is because Season 6 was the one where you were on Elements, this was the year when the LEC format, EU LCS back then, was crazy. It was the one where it was like the BO2s or whatever, right? So you actually played loads of games this year. Like you actually got to play a lot of it. I think in the summer season, mate, you played like 30 plus games yourself or something like. So it was almost more like an LCK or LPL split back then. Do you think actually, here's what I've always wondered. When people talk about experience, does experience even on a bad team actually help your career? Do you actually still learn things from it that you can take forward?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you get to scrim all the best teams as well. I think the scrims are also like super valuable. They are very underrated. Nice. And yeah, obviously, like playing on the stage, no matter if you're on a losing team, it's always super valuable, and you learn a lot in the losses. So it helped me a lot. Yeah.
Right. Then you had this weird thing where you were over on the Schalke team. And then basically, if people remember, this is the one where they got relegated, right? So can you give me the story on that? What happened with the Schalke team? What was wrong with this squad, by the way? What was the problem?
I think the main problem was just like laziness. Like at the start, we were actually pretty good. We were like top 4. We're doing really well. And then at one point, when the team realized it's going to be hard to make playoffs, I don't know, like some players just stopped playing solo queue, got super lazy, like extremely lazy. So we even dropped from the like middle zone to relegation because I don't know, people just stopped playing the game. And then Yeah, like in the relegations, it was like I think people maybe underestimated like how hard it's gonna be. There was like this scary Misfits team, right? With like Alfari, Ignar, and stuff.
Yep.
So yeah, we just ended up getting relegated. I don't know. It was a big shocker for everyone, and it really really sucked for Schalke because they invested so much money into esports, and in their first split, they're instantly relegated. Like I don't know how that org even stayed in esports after that situation, but yeah, respect to them, I guess.
Yeah, if people don't know, they basically just got the Elements roster, but then as you see, it didn't do that well, right? Here's the question I have for you. That would probably shock people, that anecdote you told where you said that once the team sort of realised, like, we can't sort of win or do what we wanted to do, instead of just saying, like, hey, we're in the middle though, you know, so like maintain like a professional, people just gave up and were sort of like, well, forget about it. Like, here's the thing I would ask you is, that might sound super shocking, but that's not as rare as people might think, right? Like one of the big factors in teams is like morale and whether people buy into the project, right? It's not just turning up and pressing the mouse and hoping you win the game, right?
Yeah, but for me, it was kind of like unacceptable back then because I was like super hardworking guy, like playing solo queue all day. And I don't know, we just got a new mid laner as well with Fox. Like, I don't know, I didn't want to give the wrong view of the team, but honestly, I don't know, some people were just not to be controlled anymore. Was not much to do. I don't want to drop any names, but
no, that's all good. Yeah. So after this, as you alluded to, you then actually went, this is funny because you tried so many times, you then went and did the NA Challenger thing. And if people remember, you were on the eUnited team, which, by the way, all these players, basically, except Fox, who was there, ended up being an LCS player. Like, Licorice was the top laner, Deftly and Zizel was the bot lane. So people know that some of those played for, like, Golden Guardians, and obviously to people like Cloud9, respectively, later. Like, the problem with this team, if people remember, was, like, it was obviously a solid team. It was right in the mix. But some of these Challenger campaigns, I've heard of brutal when you play these things. Like, aren't they online even when you play them in the NA as well? I think these are like online matches, aren't they? It's maybe only the finals is online or something. What was this experience like? Were you actually like, basically you moved to North America and you were just trying to become an LCS player at this point in NA LCS, yeah?
Yeah. The salaries was nice that they were paying, so I just thought it's a good opportunity. Yeah, basically you played the league online and then you would play the playoffs offline in the LCS studio.
Was there a lot of pressure?
Yeah, it was a lot of pressure for sure. Because I also played with rookies, and so all the pressure for the calls and stuff would always lay on me. But I enjoyed it. It was a good time. Like, we also did like a Korean boot camp before the season started for 1 month. And that was my first ever Korea boot camp, so that was pretty nice as well. And that's where I realized how insane Licorice actually is. Like, what a insane talent he is. So
yeah, give me some thoughts. Who was this guy?
Licorice was just like a random like rookie back then from Canada. Like, no one really knew much about him, but Broken Shard was my coach back then. He said, that guy is really good, like you will see in Korea. And then, yeah, we were all playing solo queue. I think I was like close to making it to Challenger, not really making it. No one could actually make it to Challenger back then, was too hard. But Licorice went like, he climbed up to top 20 Korea. So we're like, okay, this is our best player for sure. And yeah, we were super motivated to do well. We actually started the league, I think 6-0 as well. We were beating everybody. Just came short in the end in the promotion tournament. We lost to teams like Liquid, where they like last second got like a super roster assembled, like Rainover, Double Lift, and on. Yeah. I think I had a pretty good year in America. I also felt pretty good playing there. Like, having good weather, good food was nice.
Because that's also the other thing I feel like about this that people will miss is, like, when you go there, you have to do it with the hope that it's all going to work out. You're going to make it to LCS, like your future's in America. But you go for a few months, it doesn't work out, you have to come back. Like, one of the things I notice as a theme of this interview is, if people have to give you credit for one thing at a minimum, it's got to be persistence, right? A lot of people, like, I've noticed in life, I always say, it's a famous slogan that's like this, where it's something like, you know, if you're looking for an excuse, you'll find one. I think a lot of people are like that, mate. It's like they're almost just waiting for a quarter of, like, if they get 2 or 3 good excuses, that's like a reason to not have to keep trying or go for their dreams. Or they can go, well, I tried, but it didn't work out. Like, Are you really, Guy? Like, do you not have to take moments where you go and regroup, or you go to your family, or you question, should I keep doing it? You don't ever have setbacks in these time periods? You're not getting bothered by this?
No. I mean, my whole idea in my brain was like what I was working towards all the years was just like being successful in League of Legends. I'm not just gonna give up, you know? Like, why would I give up? Like, it was my dream to be successful and like make it to Worlds, and like, I don't know, I had like these big goals in my head, so I just kept going. I didn't even, not a single second, think about giving up ever.
And then if people don't remember, then you came and you qualified back into the EU LCS. By the way, this is actually one of the reasons. It's funny enough because Veteran used to always use this as the example, but I think he nailed it, which is this is exactly why, personally, even though I understand the business reasons, which haven't really aged so well, it's one of the reasons, actually, I kind of like the promotion system, mate, because for people like you and Jiizuke, I think it's perfect, because the reason he always gave this example is everyone who supposedly played Jiizuke in solo queue was like, oh, he's really skilled, but they were like, but he's toxic, so I don't want to play with him. And the point is, if he was just in like the current LEC, he'd have to get picked up by a GM. Some GM would have to commit to say, right, I want him to be my middler. Whereas in this scenario, you could just go and beat the team that's currently in the league and just get that spot. It's the same for you. You could just go. It doesn't matter if anyone thinks you should be here. That you could just go and win the game and actually get into this fucking league yourself, right? It's cool. I love that system.
I love it as well, man. I mean, even the way we got into the LCS was crazy back then. Like, I came back from America. I had lost all connection to European teams, so I'm there like with no offers. I get messaged by Lozak, the Giants GM, and he asked me to play the Spanish tournament. Like, he didn't even talk about Change the Series. He talked about the Spanish tournament. I was like, sure. And then I played with Mini Trupax, with Jiizuke in that tournament. They were last place in Spain at that time, by the way. And we instantly won the tournament with me. And they were like, Lozak said, hey, I want to build the Challenger Series team around you. Like, who would you want to play with? And then I said, oh, aren't we just playing with the same roster? They said, no, we don't really consider Mini Trupax or Jiizuke for the Challenger Series team. We're thinking about this or this player. And then I instantly told them, if Jiizuke or Mini Trupax are not playing, then I'm not playing either. Like, they need to play, because I thought they were really good. And yeah, I don't know, we just like, there were like power rankings at that time about the Challenger Series. It was actually pretty stacked back then. There was like Red Bull, PSG, Schalke, and like some big investments were made to make it into the LCS, right? So everyone had us like last place or second last place, and we smashed through every team. Like I think we went undefeated until the last regular season match, and we smashed through playoffs as well. Like no one could stop us, and no one expected this. You know, like we were like the randoms. So that's why I also really miss promotion. Like. It was the best experiences ever, honestly. Like promoting it into the league, it was the best thing ever, yeah.
Yes. And also, as basically the interesting thing about this particular squad was, it's funny you tell that story about like how the roster was uncertain when it was in the challenger scene, because obviously the joke is the whole team, except Ruin, just stayed on fucking Giants. Basically, except for they didn't have Kabashar. This just was the team that became Vitality, if people don't know. This was the lineup, like Mini Trupax, and people don't know, changed his name to Attila. These are all the players you know. So actually, this core of players has now played a bunch of time together, right? When you came to this team, give me some thoughts, since obviously you already played it this time, with the player Ruin, the guy who people might remember also was on CLG, I think the year after this or something. Because I remember like he had something to his game, but at the same time though, it was also a pretty extreme game. It seems like, who was this player? It seemed like kind of a bit of a crazy top laner, right?
Yeah, I mean, we needed the top laner for the Challenger Series, and the GM would always ask me questions like, who should I get? And I think I threw in that sentence, hey, can you just get a Korean? Like,
okay.
He's like, yeah, sure, I can try. So they just got Ruin. And he actually spoke like decent English as well. He was a super friendly guy. I mean, when he played in our team, we never really could see his skill, because we would always, like, our game plan was really straightforward with this team. We'd like play straight into bot, like hard snowball bot. We just need a top laner that plays a tank, you know, and doesn't need much help. But I think later on in his career, when he went to CLG, you could see him like playing like these carry picks that he could never play with us, and he was actually performing pretty well on them. Yeah, was just a skilled guy, but I think he was also too old, I would say. Like he came in new to the league and he was already 25, I think, back then.
Okay, right, okay.
Yeah, so it was hard for him to stay for many years. But yeah, I think he made the best out of it for sure.
Right, one of the reasons, if I had to explain to a modern fan why Jiizuke doesn't play in the LCS or the LEC, has nothing to do with skill level or his actual ability. I actually think he's a really good player. I would have him on loads of teams if I was like doing a min-max budget roster or something. But as far as I've heard, the real reason why is this, Gillius, which is, I can see why this guy was a solo queue phenom. People tell me if you play in his team, you have to basically play his style. Like, he's going to do his Jiizuke shit where, you know, he'll roam top anytime he wants or just fucking go crazy and do some mad outplay or whatever. What's it like to be the jungler for this guy? Because I always felt like, you said before there was like a structure in your team. It always felt like in your game, you were one of those junglers where it's like, you can't power farm, mate. You better get ready at like level 3 or level 4. You better fucking go to that mid lane because otherwise it's like humanoid. You might get the kill, you might die as well. Give me some thoughts. How do you play for Jiizuke? What do you have to do?
You have two options. Either you get ready level 3 to dive the enemy mid laner. That is like, I don't know, like 70% HP. You're going to risk the whole game on it.
Sure.
Or you like play in a way where you try to strangle the enemy jungler. Like you go and find him and make sure Jiizuke is just in 1-on-1 because he's always wins 1-on-1. You just like make sure the enemy jungler doesn't step into mid lane. Like try to just fight him and find him and ward him out. So that was basically it. You need to be very active. There's no time to full clear or power farm or anything like this. Always have to make sure Jiizuke is doing well. But he also rewards you. Like we could beat the best teams in the league with Jiizuke if we just make sure he gets to play his style and he gets to stay 1-on-1, right? So it was a rewarding thing for sure. Like when you played for him, he also like hard carried the game. Just like he was super insane.
Because then the other thing is, this is actually more a question about YamatoCannon, but I'll set it up using the example of the players in the team. The other reason why this actually quite early on made me realise, like, there has to be something to this YamatoCannon guy. Because if people remember back then, they really did make that meme that, like, oh, it's just a voice, just a cool voice. And people didn't know, was the Spice team just talented? Was it actually him? Who knew? Back then, the perception was, you know, people actually tried to make it like he was a con man. They were like, he's too good on camera, so he must be like, you know, fake or whatever. But what's funny is this team, to me, implies he had to be like a thinker about the game, because if you know the players in this team, mate, Capachard used to be like a carry top laner who famously, when he had Diamond Procs, the joke was Diamond Path just path top 24/7. Like, I know, because my mate Forgiven was on the other side of the map. Like, can I get some fucking ganks? So, but it didn't matter on that team. That was how they played. So, when, as you say, when Capachard's on this team, Capachard's playing a bloody tank and weak side in most of the game. In fact, as you say, this team, interestingly enough, even though everyone flamed the bot lane, played through bot lane. It was like open up mid to go and snowball bot, like you said. And so to me, that implies like some of this must have been YamatoCannon thinking and setting up the team and figuring out the identity. What would you say?
I was surprised about that too. Like now thinking about it, Cabo always played these weird picks like Lucian top. I don't know, like only carries. But yeah, like Yamato was basically somebody who taught us really well how to play like 1-3-1, like playing side lane and snowballing in mid game. I don't know. We would always give last pick counter pick to Cabo. He would always go for his freaky picks. I don't really remember. It probably had to do with Yamato as well, but yeah, I don't remember too much about it.
Here's what I have to ask, which is the obvious question to me, though, Gillius, is, like you said earlier, I actually did think this particular lineup, the one with Gillius and Jiizuke, look, listen, this is obviously like, it was almost like you could have had a blackboard with how to play. There was like protocols of how to play, but it worked. This formula worked. As you said, this team could actually, it was one of the only teams in the league that could actually upset like a G2 or a Fnatic. Back then, they used to almost like easily handle the rest of the league and then just wait till the playoffs. Like, your team was one of the ones famously with the Peter Dunn Splice team that could kind of mix it up, could give him some upset potential. So, like, to me, I think this is one of the most unfair cuts of your whole career, mate. It should look like you were one of the like things making the engine of Vitality work, were you not?
I mean, I was not really cut, you know, like I kind of cut myself out of the team.
Explain it then. Like, come on then. Like, this seems like the team to stay in, mate. Everything was going well.
I mean, so we had this like big win streak, right? 7-0. Now we're like the big dogs in the league. Like every top team wants to scrim us. Like our scrim schedule looks like Fnatic, G2. Like,
right.
It was getting like, the practice was getting super tough. like for me, like mentally, like trying to stay stable because we were getting fisted in scrims. We were just this kind of team that couldn't win scrims. I don't know why. So one time I went out with Yamato and Cabo, and I told them, wouldn't it be great if we could get like substitutes for mid lane and jungle? Like
you recommended yourself essentially what got you replaced sort of later. Okay.
Yeah, it was my idea.
Hit me with it. Come on then.
And then they basically said, yo, we got Kikis. Like, who do you have for mid lane? So basically Kikis would play with Jiizuke. I would play with a mid laner. And I went through my friend list back then, and I thought, who could be like an insane mid laner? I saw this guy, Larssen. I was like, okay, I want Larssen. And then I told my orc about it, and they said, I already messaged Larssen back then as well. Like, I was like, yo, would you be ready to do this?
Okay.
He was like, yeah, sure, you know. And I think they said, yo, we agree with getting Kikis, but we disagree with getting Larssen. That guy is too big of a random. We don't believe in it. And then, yeah, I basically said, could I maybe find a new team? Blah, blah, blah. Back then, there was the Schalke roster with Amazing, and I think the team was not super happy with Amazing. So I was like, there was some talks with Schalke getting me over there. And basically, when I like committed to maybe joining Schalke, there was where there was no no way back for me into the Vitality roster, right?
Right.
Like,
By the way,
I think
keep going.
And Yamato even gave me a chance. He was like, forget all of this like changing team stuff. Just be patient for 1 or 2 weeks. Like, let it all cool down. We will just have 2 junglers going into Worlds. Like, just be patient. Like he said, I trust you, brother. You started this all of it with us, and I was just too stupid to see it. I just had too much energy, too much anger going on. I don't know.
Because one thing is another theme that people will notice has emerged in this interview is it looks like I always call those off-season / you're trying to get into a bigger team moves like musical chairs, because like at the end someone doesn't get the spot and someone ends up sometimes fucked actually be like the complete outlook. Like in your case, was it a mistake to sort of believe these orgs, the Fanatics, the Schalkes, that like you've got a spot for you? Like back then, do you think you just had to take the gamble and hope that they were going to give you the spot? Should you have stuck with what you had? How do you view it as an older man now when you look back and you've got life experience? And you're not just some kid thinking the world. What would you think if you look back now?
I think looking back now, I should have just when Yamato said stay on the team, we have 2 junglers, I should have just said sure, I'm in. Let Kikis like play 1 or 2 weeks, let him like do well. Like I will get my shot eventually again. Like go through that whole experience going to the World Championship, you know. Because in the end, I got no credit for that. Like obviously,
oh sure,
I was,
yes.
But I kind of built this team. Like I played with these players for 2 years. You know, I taught them a lot of stuff. So it was kind of sad for me. And going into the next offseason, I was so fucked because nobody actually knew what happened. Like no one knew that I was the one who like benched myself.
Right.
So I got no offers. I had to go to Turkey. You know, my career was kind of. I was also still in a really good age back then where teams would always consider to go pick me up. So it definitely fucked my career, I would say. It was not good what I did.
Right, I wanted to actually ask about those specific teams before we get to the classic question of why were you replaced by Kikis so many times? Because I actually think it's the framing of it that fucks you over, mate. Because as you say, everyone's perception, especially in this case, they don't even know the story on that one. They just think that that the split wasn't going well, so they replaced you with Kikis. And the story people think is that every team just goes, well, it's not good enough. And so if you remember, the meme back then was everyone was like, well, Kikis is good at communications or whatever the fuck. But all I'll say is this is, if anyone watches, it's not like Kikis then stays in these teams for 5 years and wins the LEC. Like, mostly he comes in and replaces you, they do all right, and then he himself has to go to a new team. So, like, to you, is there do you see this as a theme? Like, is it just coincidence that he's replaced you? I mean, to be fair, you are both just junglers trying to join team. What was it like for you? It must have been strange, right?
I mean, at the start, I like really hated him for it, for like when he replaced me in Unicorns of Love, because I kind of knew what he did. Like, we were in America playing the promotion tournament. He didn't really like his teammates. He would always hang out with us. He was like we would feel bad for him. Yeah, you know, this guy is like getting flamed by his teammates every day in scrims. Let's like hang out with him. And like he was a bit too friendly though for my taste. Like I was like, is this guy trying to get into the team? What the fuck is this guy doing? you know, and then I go to Taiwan and he like, I don't know, apparently he was like playing duo with all of my teammates and like lingering himself into the team. At the start, I didn't like him, but later on, I think it was just coincidence with the Vitality thing because he was like top 10 solo queue. We needed another jungler. It was just coincidence. It had nothing to do with our names, I think, in combination.
Right. One of the strange things is when you went to Turkey, you were then only there for a few games. Now, first of all, two things. One, if people don't know, you obviously have Turkish ethnicity, so it wasn't just like a move to a random place. I'm sure for you it was an interesting angle, right? So what was the experience like? But why was this one cut short?
So after week 3, I think it was, the GM asked me, hey, we cannot pay your salary anymore. And then I said,
okay, all right.
Because my salary was pretty high, actually.
Okay.
And I guess they overestimated what they could pay. So I was like, okay, then I guess I'm going home. They were like, oh, you wouldn't want to play for free? I was like, no, I'm not doing that. And yeah, I don't want to go into too much detail, but later on, following a lawsuit as well, I actually ended up getting all my money.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
Yeah, but yeah, it just basically came down to that. Honestly, not the greatest team either. I'm kind of happy it ended quickly. Like, I played with Nagne, who was a Korean mid laner. He had 0 English. Okay, I could literally not communicate with him. Right. I don't know. The culture was like not great in the team. Many people just didn't play solo queue. Like, they were not in the same pace as me. So that's for me. When I'm in the gaming room, like practicing all day playing solo queue, and I don't see people next to me, I just like kind of lose hope in the team anyway. So.
And what about to be in Turkey? What, like, is this somewhere you've already been a bunch of times in your life at this point? Was it an interesting experience to live there? What was it like?
It was kind of stressful for me because I have many relevant relatives in Istanbul. So I had to like, here and there, you know, visit my grandma, visit my uncles. It was not for me living there. It was too stressful for me. Like, too much going on, like too much family. I always prefer to just be in a place where I just don't know anybody, where I can just like spam the game. Like when I was in America or when I'm in Berlin, I don't know anyone here, so it feels best to like fully commit to the job here, where I don't know many people.
Okay, this is a question I'm expressly making. It's a personal question about you and your life and how you see the world. It's not a political question, so don't worry about any of that, Jazz. Which is, if people don't know, historically, actually, there are a lot of Turkish people, obviously, in Germany from decades and decades and decades ago, where it was like a whole, I'd say a work program, I think, or something, when they let a bunch of people in who had like visas or whatever. And basically, it's why famously, it's not a joke. If you go to like the kebab place there, it's probably going to be like a Turkish guy, and he's going to like have probably lived in Germany decades, but he knows all the like Turkish cuisine and how to do it and stuff. Right, here's my question to you is, are you someone, like, how do you resolve that aspect? Like, on the one hand, you're German, on the one hand, you could say you're Turkish. How do you personally for yourself resolve it? How do you think of yourself?
It's hard to say. Like, in Germany, I'm the Turkish guy. When I go to Turkey, okay, I'm the German guy.
So. Oh, right, really? You get it from both sides, right? I see.
No,
okay.
Yeah, it's hard. Like, I have a German passport. I was like raised in Germany, so I have like German culture in me, I would say. Like, but in the end of the day, my blood is Turkish, so I don't even have an answer to this question. It's hard for me. Like, I would say I'm just both, you know.
Because one of the reasons I also did want to ask is actually also about your career, which is I've actually heard that for example, there was some players in Counter-Strike who had a similar background. They were like German, they played for Mouse Sports and things like that, but then they would also say like I'm ethnically Turkish or whatever. I've actually heard in some of those cases, like some of them did say like it maybe was like a limiting factor to success in the German scene. Like maybe you had to be better, or maybe it was like, look, I don't know if this is a big deal. Like, was it ever a factor for you? Do you ever feel like people within the scene treated you like you weren't a German player, or they had standoffish? Was it ever a factor, do you think?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
No. Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. Okay, what about this then? After this time period, if people remember, you actually did play in the German scene. You actually had to go basically and sort of like, did this feel, are you somebody, I've noticed in this interview, it feels like in your career, you just kind of just really do put one foot in front of the other, right? Okay, now go on to the next thing, take that challenge, right? Does this not feel like a step down if you've been in LCS, if you've been to like Worlds, if you've been in playoffs and stuff? If you have to go and play in the German scene, wouldn't a lot of people say your career's going the wrong way, or you've been humbled or something? What would you say?
No, it feels horrible to do all the stuff that I did in Vitality. Man, I had so much hype back then. It was crazy. Like, and then like in the end, you like end up like playing for Artok in the German league. It feels terrible, but I had some motivations going in. I was like, World Championship is in Europe that year. I will get to live in the gaming house, like really like just spam the game all day, all night. Maybe I can prove myself in solo queue. Maybe I can somehow like get noticed again. I had my hopes. So yeah, that's what kept me going, honestly, that Wales was in Europe, yeah.
Do you feel like at this point in time, this has been my perspective as an outsider, is your problem was, cause until Vitality you weren't on a top team, you were just like a whatever team, and so if someone didn't follow the game closely and watch your matches, they could just think like, oh, it's just like a low-level LEC player, who cares? And then for me, I actually think this is what's strange about like branding, is even though now I think the branding's, like your reputation's caught up and the branding actually synergizes well, I actually think in some ways the branding then almost hurt you a bit, mate, because I actually think what happened was, it's kind of, the best example would be right now Conor McGregor. So Conor McGregor right now is still a massive big name and he still does the same trash talk, but everyone knows it doesn't hit the same way. It was different when you actually thought he would beat this guy's ass and win any fight. Now if he says it, part of you just thinks like, come on mate, anyone could say that, like you haven't won a fight in years, you know. So I actually think back then people used to there was almost like a backlash to the trash talk where people wanted to be like, well but you're not good enough to talk shit, basically as far as I can tell, they always thought unless you're like Yankos, you're not allowed to talk shit, like you're just some guy in the league. Did you ever get this sense of like people didn't actually give you credit for how good you are as a player, and they just reacted to the image or the brand?
Yeah, I would say so, 100%. I've been underrated mostly in my career, yeah. Like, maybe not in Vitality time or like Schalke times, but yeah, mostly people like to, discredit me, I think, and just say it's a showman, you know. But I think people in the league, like the people who play, you know, players, coaches, they know my skills, so I'm fine with that, you know.
I mean, I always got the sense that even though at the time it was your best run, I always thought people actually dismissed the Vitality thing the other way around from how you told it. They almost made it sound like you were the one being banded, and then you might have told you, like, just can't get level 3 or whatever. Whereas, like, as I said, like, listen, boys, there's no way Jiizuke is like game plan the game. Like, he just does what he does. Like, to me, that was obviously you correcting an issue in the rest of the team. And as you said, you're actually quite pivotal to that team rising up, right? So I feel like in that era, bear in mind your team finished 4th, but I don't think you really got the full credit, right? No one was really talking about you as like a top jungler or giving you the all LEC credit or whatever it was called back then. Like, I don't think you ever really got like individual props at the time, though, right?
I mean, a little bit, but yeah, not much really. But that's what happens most of the times with my team. I think that has to do with my role as well. Like, I think I'm a really good facilitator, so Jiizuke kind of stole the show, you know?
Oh, sure. Yes.
And then later on, Abedaga stole the show. But that's my role. That's how it's supposed to be. Like,
right.
I'm supposed to make my mid laner look as good as possible, so I don't really mind it too much.
Events come and go, fame rises and then falls away. You have a job, you lose a job. You do one thing, you have to move on to another. But one of the cool things about my career is I have my own support network who's always got my back. So I always know I can rely on support to do the work I want to do and talk the way I want to talk and not have to follow certain rules that others arbitrarily have to follow. And that support group is, of course, called the Illuminati, my Patreon community. This video and all the others on my channel was kindly supported by Matt Pugnaccio Rakula, Frisky, Ahmed Haju, Tobias Bernasconi, Toucan, Tosh, Jensen Gore, Animosity, and you know it, always my main man Jerky's minion, rocking with me, ride or die. Would you like to suggest a topic or a guest for a future episode of Reflections or a talk show? Do you want teasers? Find out who the upcoming guests are? Maybe you want to ask me a question for my video AMA where I tend to go quite in depth, or perhaps you want to take part in one of those really long donated discussions where we talk about whatever you're into in esports. Well, if any of those perks or any of the others catch your fancy, join the Illuminati today via the Patreon link in the description box where? Down below.